Hey guys, Hades here. So I've done a number of videos and I haven't had any advanced classes yet. This will be my first one. This is a Shakespeare PowerPoint and it could take about an hour in class, so I'm going to divide it up into three parts. There's going to be an introduction, then we'll touch on his sonnets, and then finally we'll get to some of his plays. We'll look at some of his quotes during this and we'll discuss their meaning. And we'll look at his life a little, what we know about him, some of what we know about him. What was Shakespeare's first name? Who was Shakespeare? Are you familiar with anything that Shakespeare wrote? If so, maybe mention it in the comments. Shakespeare's first name was William. That's kind of an easy one, right? Shakespeare's probably the most famous and usually considered the greatest writer in the English language. I hear tell some people want to learn English just to read Shakespeare in his native tongue. But there is a lot of stuff that is unknown about Shakespeare and his life. It wasn't very well documented. For example, we've got Chaucer several hundred years before him. We know much more about Chaucer than we do about Shakespeare. Let's look at a couple quotes. I must be cruel only to be kind. Thus bad begins and worse remains behind. What does that mean? If you want, you could pause and look that up or take a guess. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. Basically, I must be cruel only to be kind means being cruel to help someone or appearing cruel. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say a child tries to stick his hand into the fire. So the mother pulls him back and slaps his hand. That seems kind of cruel, right? But actually what she's doing is trying to help him, right? So being cruel to be kind. Maybe you're helping someone, although it doesn't appear that way. It seems like you're being cruel or mean somehow. All right. But I will wear my heart upon my sleeve. What does that mean? Okay, someone who wears their heart upon their sleeve is someone who's easily hurt, very emotional, maybe trusts people too much, someone who wears their heart on their sleeve. If we look at it literally, right, your heart is in your chest beneath your rib cage. It's hard to get to, right? You have to puncture through your rib cage, through your bones to get your heart. But if you wear your heart on your sleeve, you'll easily be hurt, right? So it means you trust people too much, or I don't know, you're very emotional, right? When was Shakespeare born? When did he die? How many plays did Shakespeare write? What is a sonnet? How many sonnets did Shakespeare write? We don't know when Shakespeare was born, but his recorded date of baptism was the 26th of April, 1564. So that's documented, but we don't know when he was born. We could presume maybe a week or two before his baptism, but on occasion, people might not get baptized until they're a year old or 2 years old, right? Baptism is something in the church where they pour water on you and say you're part of the church. Uh, they recorded the date of his baptism, but we don't know when he was born. So most people would assume that he was born within a few weeks of his baptism, but we don't know for sure. Shakespeare died April 23rd, 1616, at the age of probably 52. I'm sorry, probably 53, maybe 52 years of age. But we don't know. A lot is missing, right? A lot of documentation from his lifetime is missing. So there are some things we just don't know about him. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of trouble, and by opposing, end them. That's probably his most famous quote, to be or not to be. This is from Hamlet. Basically, he's just contemplating, Hamlet is contemplating whether or not it's better to be dead or alive. Shakespeare wrote 38 plays in the following genres: tragedy, comedy, history, and romance. Sometimes his romances are referred to as tragicomedies. I like the tragedies and the histories, to be honest. They, I guess, if I have to say it, they're more entertaining. His comedies I didn't really care for as far as the story goes. I'm the kind of person that likes a good story. And his comedies, to me, I don't know, a lot of great writing. You get some great quotes from them. And other than that, the story, in my opinion, isn't so good. I love a good tragedy. In a Shakespearean tragedy, a noble yet flawed character who experiences a reversal of fortune is placed in a set of circumstances that ultimately lead to ruin and death. Right? Tragedy, bad things happen. And that's a funny little thing there, right? I think I'll make a love story, everybody dies. Some of his tragedies would include Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, King Lear, Antony and Cleopatra, Titus Andronicus, and Julius Caesar. Hamlet is my personal favorite, probably his most popular. Well, maybe right up there with Romeo and Juliet. I also really like Macbeth. Comedy in Shakespeare's time has a very different definition than that of contemporary times. In Shakespearean comedy, a character is at odds with society or some tradition, but ultimately the work is lighthearted and has a happy ending, right? So it ends very differently than his tragedies. Typically, the comedies have a happy ending, and they're not considered comedies necessarily because people laugh out loud and they're funny. Yes, they would laugh at some of Shakespeare's lines, but you could even laugh at some of the lines in a tragedy. Some of his comedies include A Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, The Merchant of Venice, All's Well That Ends Well, and The Comedy of Errors. This is not all of them. Shakespeare's history plays were a glimpse of history. However, during the Elizabethan era, Shakespeare had to keep the characters of the royal family appearing good, thus destroying what many see as their accurate portrayal of royals. Right? The lineage of the Queen during Shakespeare's time, you could not say anything bad about any of her ancestors. You get in trouble for that at the time. So, of course, the royals, at least in Queen Elizabeth's line, her lineage, they always were the good guys, right? Even if in life they maybe weren't so good, right? So his histories were, based on history, like you watch a film today. There's creative liberties taken, right? So altering things a little so that maybe it's more entertainment than history, really. You're not learning a history lesson. There'll be some true things in there, but a lot of stuff that's created for the play that maybe necessarily isn't true. Some of his histories include King John, Edward II, Henry IV, Part 1, Henry IV, Part 2. I really like those. Henry V, then there was Henry VI, 3 plays, Richard III, Henry VIII. And some of his tragedies can also be shoved into the history category because they were based on real people, like Macbeth, King Lear, Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, and Coriolanus. Romance, also known as tragicomedy, is another genre of drama that Shakespeare wrote. It became quite popular during his later years in life. Basically, there's elements of tragedy and comedy that are present in these romance plays. So there's some comedy and some tragedy. Shakespeare's final four plays can be considered romances: Pericles, Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. So he only had four romances or tragicomedies, and they were his last four. This above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. A lot of people like this quote, usually just the part that says, to thine own self be true, right? Basically that means you'll be a better person if you're true to yourself. You'll be better able to be true to other people. However, it's interesting the character who said this, right? The character who said this was in Hamlet, Ophelia's father, and he was not a good character. He was kind of a bad guy, manipulative and stuff. So some people believe that this is all just garbage coming out of his mouth. It's not something to really quote because the character who said it was not a good character. Okay, guys, this is a good place to end the first video on Shakespeare. We'll do two more coming up pretty soon. Next time we're going to look at sonnets, and we're going to kind of dissect one, try to figure out what it means. We'll analyze it. But we're done with Shakespeare for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will finish these Shakespeare ones and see how well they do. And if people like them, then I'll do more advanced lessons. And there's only so much information on Shakespeare in this particular PowerPoint. If you're interested, let me know. I'll do more Shakespeare after I finish these three. Again, just let me know in the comments. I don't know who's interested in what. I have a lot of different levels of lessons here. So today, starting advanced. This is my first advanced lesson. I'm creating a playlist for advanced lessons. So let me know. There's a few other things we could talk about. And if you really like Shakespeare, we could dig deeper into it after you watch the first three and you want more. Let me know. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.